She had a plan, a calm, predictable life, a promising new relationship, a month of freedom. He had a reputation. Cold, arrogant, ruthless. The CEO no one wanted to be alone with, especially not for 30 days. So when Ella Roberts is handpicked to join Nathaniel King on a high-stakes business trip, her carefully built world shatters. What starts as a month of tension, power struggles, and impossible expectations quickly spirals into something neither of them saw coming. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Ella Roberts stared at the screen of her laptop, her coffee forgotten and cooling beside her. The words in her inbox blinked back like a cruel joke. Business trip to Delmont City. Assigned team, CEO Nathaniel King, Executive Assistant Ella Roberts. Duration 30 days. Departure in 48 hours. She blinked once, twice, then sat back in her chair, stunned. 30 days. Not 5, not a week, 30 days. With him, the company's notorious, cold, perfection-obsessed CEO. Nathaniel King was not just her boss. He was practically a corporate myth, known for chewing up managers and replacing executives like pawns on a board. People spoke of him in hushed tones. She had managed to avoid his direct line of fire for almost 2 years. Now, she was being shipped off with him like some corporate sacrifice. "Are you kidding me?" she muttered to no one, dragging a hand through her curls. She had plans this month. Big ones. A much-needed break after 2 back-to-back project launches. Spa weekend with her best friends. Her sister's art show. And, of course, Ryan, the charming architect she met 2 weeks ago. They'd gone on 1 amazing date and had 3 more planned. He was kind, gentle, the opposite of Nathaniel King. She looked back at the email as if it might change if she stared long enough. It didn't. Frustration bubbled up in her chest. She rose from her desk and marched toward the office of her department head, Greg. He looked up as she stormed in. "Greg, what the hell is this?" He didn't even pretend to be confused. "The trip? Yeah, I saw the assignment this morning." "You didn't think to run it by me first?" she snapped. "A full month with King? I have a life, Greg." Greg leaned back, hands up. "I didn't assign it, Ella." "He did. Specifically requested you." She stopped in her tracks. "What?" Greg nodded. "Your presentation last week? Word got back to him. Said you're the only assistant in the building who knows how to stay 3 steps ahead." His words. Ella sat down, stunned. Nathaniel King had noticed her? And now she was on his radar? Great. Just great. "I just started seeing someone," she mumbled, staring at the floor. Greg gave her a sympathetic look. "I'd cancel the dinners. Trust me, this isn't a vacation. It's 30 days of 6 a.m. to midnight. He's intense." She already knew that. Everyone knew that. The moment she stepped back into her cubicle, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Hello." A smooth, clipped voice filled her ear. "Miss Roberts." "Nathaniel King. You received your itinerary?" She straightened immediately. "Yes, sir. Be ready. Jet leaves Thursday at 7 a.m. sharp. I expect efficiency, precision, and 0 drama. Pack appropriately. We'll be representing the company in front of investors, city officials, and international partners." "Yes, sir." He paused. "Do you have a problem with this assignment?" "Yes. A massive one." But she swallowed the words. "No, sir. I'll be ready." The line went dead. Ella sat down again, this time slowly. She exhaled and stared at her reflection in the darkened screen of her laptop. This was not how her September was supposed to go. She was supposed to be dating a sweet man and spending weekends at brunch, not running PowerPoints for a man who reportedly fired a guy over a typo. She opened her messages to Ryan, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Hey, something came up with work. I have to go out of town for a while." She sighed. At home that night, Her suitcase lay open and empty on her bed while she sat in the corner with a glass of wine, staring at it like it was a portal to hell. She'd Googled Delmont City's weather, mild fall temperatures, tried to estimate how many suits she'd need, and even started a playlist to calm her nerves. Nothing helped. All she could think about was how close she'd be to him. Trapped. For 30 days. She knew his type. Arrogant. Cold. Emotionless. A machine in a three-piece suit. She'd seen the way he walked into boardrooms, the silence that fell in his wake, the way executives scrambled to please him. She hated that kind of power. She hated people who wielded it like a sword. And now she was going to be by his side. All day. Every day. For an entire month. It felt like the beginning of a nightmare. The airstrip was cold and sterile in the early morning, the sky a pale slate of gray as dawn hesitated on the edge of the horizon. Ella pulled her coat tighter around her, dragging her carry-on behind her with stubborn resolve. She hadn't slept. Not really. Between packing, overthinking, and triple-checking the itinerary, her body was running purely on caffeine and nerves. The private jet sat ahead like something out of a movie, sleek, white, and utterly intimidating. A single flight attendant stood at the steps, smiling politely, clipboard in hand. "Miss Roberts," she asked. Ella nodded. "Right this way. Mr. King is already on board." Of course he is, she thought. He probably arrived an hour early, just to remind everyone else what punctuality should look like. She climbed the stairs slowly, every step making her stomach tighten. The cabin was silent, too silent. Cream leather seats. Dark walnut trim. Everything pristine and impossibly expensive. Nathaniel King sat near the front, one leg crossed over the other, suit jacket perfectly fitted to his broad shoulders, a tablet in his hand and not a hair out of place. His presence dominated the space without effort. He looked up as she entered. "You're on time," he said flatly. She forced a smile. "Wouldn't dream of being otherwise." "Good. Sit." It wasn't a request. Ella sank into the seat across from him, heart thudding like a drum. The flight attendant closed the door, and the hum of engines grew as the jet prepared for takeoff. No small talk. No welcome. Just cold efficiency. Perfect. She kept her eyes on the window, pretending to admire the sunrise. Anything to avoid looking directly at him. Nathaniel broke the silence 10 minutes into the flight. "Our first stop is the Delmont Commerce Summit. You'll prep the notes for the keynote panel. I don't want to repeat myself more than once." She nodded, grabbing her iPad. "Noted. You'll also handle room coordination for the board members arriving Thursday. And I want daily briefs on the investment leads we meet. By 7 every morning." She scribbled it all down, swallowing her frustration. This wasn't just work, it was military precision. "I trust you brought formal evening wear?" he added, eyes flicking to her without warmth. "I packed for every scenario," she replied. He gave a curt nod and returned to his tablet. Silence fell again, heavy and awkward. Ella closed her eyes for a moment, willing herself to breathe. Delmont City was colder than she expected. Its skyline a jagged silhouette of modern glass and steel against the gray autumn sky. The company car waiting at the airport whisked them away to the Imperial Grand, one of the city's most elite hotels. The lobby gleamed with crystal chandeliers and fresh white orchids. Their arrival was swift. The staff had been prepped. Mr. King never waited. Ella trailed behind him, heels clicking softly on the marble floor as a concierge led them to the executive elevator. "You'll be staying on the 42nd floor, Suite B," Nathaniel said without looking at her. "My suite is across the hall." Her throat dried instantly. "Across the hall." She forced a polite nod. "Understood." Once inside her room, Ella dropped her bags and exhaled sharply, finally alone. The suite was gorgeous. White linens, floor-to-ceiling windows, a city view that would take anyone's breath away. But it felt like a cage. A luxurious, suffocating cage. She peeled off her coat and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folders in her briefcase. There were schedules to review, names to memorize, and dress codes to double-check. But all she could think about was how cold this trip had started, and how much colder it could still get. The first day of meetings was a blur. Ella sat beside Nathaniel during the summit panels, catching every word, every shift in the room's tone, taking notes like her life depended on it. He didn't speak to her unless it was to issue a command. Schedule the next meeting. Get me the investor file. No, not that one, the updated figures. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The sharpness in his tone was enough to slice through any excuse. At lunch, she reached for her coffee and accidentally knocked over a notepad. Nathaniel's eyes cut toward her like a blade. Be more aware of your space, Miss Roberts. She froze, heart-dropping. Sorry. He didn't reply. Just turned away. The car ride back to the hotel was silent, and the awkwardness had grown roots. She sat stiffly on the opposite side of the back seat, watching the rain spatter against the tinted windows. The city passed in a blur of lights and gray drizzle. When they arrived, Nathaniel stepped out first without waiting for her. She followed quietly, exhaustion dragging at her limbs. Back in her suite, Ella dropped her bag and kicked off her heels with a groan. Her feet were killing her, her head ached, and her chest felt tight from holding in everything she wanted to scream. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, tugging her hair free from its tight bun. The woman staring back looked tired, stretched thin. This was day 1. Only 29 more to go. She crawled into bed without dinner, her mind replaying every clipped comment, every cold stare, every awkward silence. And deep in her chest, a quiet voice whispered something she didn't want to hear. What if you don't survive this trip? By the 4th day in Delmont City, Ella Roberts was running on fumes. Her days started at 6:30 and ended long after midnight. Her inbox was a war zone, her planner a battlefield. Nathaniel King expected perfection, and she was barely keeping up. She hadn't spoken to Ryan since she left. Every time she opened her messages to explain the situation, she closed them again. What was she going to say? Hey, sorry I vanished. Just stuck on a month-long trip with a terrifying man who makes me question all my life choices. No, that wasn't the kind of thing you sent in a text. She adjusted her navy pencil skirt and pulled her blazer tighter as she walked into the towering glass conference center. The summit had shifted into its high-gear phase, private meetings with investors and key clients. She was expected to be invisible, but completely indispensable. Present but silent. Nathaniel was already inside, seated across from a French venture capitalist named Henri Duval, whose cologne was so strong it could legally be classified as chemical warfare. Ella moved to the side of the room quietly, laying out the contracts in perfect alignment. As she stepped back, her heel caught the edge of the thick rug. She stumbled. Not a full trip, but enough. Nathaniel didn't even flinch, but he did glance up from his papers. His eyes, steel gray and impossibly sharp, flicked to her ankle, then to her face. Watch your footing, he said, voice low but unmistakably clipped. I'm fine, she muttered, cheeks burning. Duval gave a lazy smile. She's charming, your assistant. Nathaniel's tone turned arctic. She's efficient. Ella swallowed hard and stepped back into her corner, her hands folded, her chest tight. Another hour passed before the meeting ended, and Duval finally left, still smirking. The moment the door closed, she braced herself for another cold remark. But instead, Nathaniel set the papers down and looked at her fully. You're limping. She froze. It's nothing, she said too quickly. Just the heels. He studied her like he didn't quite believe her. Then, to her complete shock, he stood and walked around the table. The distance between them disappeared in a matter of seconds. Ella's breath caught in her throat. Sit, he said. I said I'm fine. Sit. His voice didn't rise, but something about the way he said it brooked no argument. She sat. He knelt in front of her and gently lifted her right foot. His fingers brushed against her ankle, and electricity zipped up her spine. She didn't dare move. Didn't even breathe. I'm not made of glass, you know, she said, trying to lighten the tension that hung like fog between them. He didn't smile, but his touch softened. You shouldn't have to be uncomfortable to do your job. She blinked. That was unexpected. I didn't think you cared about anyone's comfort, she muttered. He glanced up at her, and for the first time since the trip began, there was something different in his eyes. Not ice. Not indifference. Something curious. I care when it affects performance. There it was. A rational reason. A shield. Still, she saw it, the tiniest crack in the armor. After a long beat, he let her foot go gently. We'll cancel the last 2 meetings today. You can review the contracts and rest. Her brows furrowed. What about your schedule? I'm adapting it. Unless you'd rather limp through another 5 hours. She opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Instead, she nodded once. Thank you. Nathaniel rose and walked back around the table, just like that. But the air was different now. Thicker. Charged. Later that evening, Ella found herself in the hotel lounge, sitting in a dimly lit corner booth with a glass of red wine she probably didn't need. The entire floor had a rich golden glow, soft jazz playing in the background, and the buzz of corporate guests unwinding after long meetings. She just wanted one moment to feel like a person again, not a perfectly polished machine. You drink Cabernet. The voice made her freeze. Nathaniel stood beside the booth, hands in his pockets, his tie loosened slightly. It was the first time she'd seen him without it tightened to the millimeter. His sleeves were rolled up just above his wrists. Relaxed. Almost human. I drink whatever helps my feet stop screaming, she replied dryly. To her utter shock, he smirked. Not a full smile. But close. Mind if I join you? She stared at him. Seriously? He raised an eyebrow. Would you say no? She gestured to the seat across from her. I guess I'm not really in a position to refuse the boss. He sat down. Consider this off the clock. Ella laughed once. You don't strike me as someone who ever goes off the clock. Nathaniel swirled his drink, whiskey neat. Of course. Not usually. They sat in silence for a while. Not awkward this time. Just quiet. Then he said, You're doing well. She blinked. Excuse me? With the summit. The prep, the timing. You keep up. She leaned back. Coming from you, I think that qualifies as high praise. I don't waste words, he replied. Ella tilted her head. So why now? Nathaniel looked at her then, and the moment their eyes met, the world felt still. I underestimated you, he said quietly. Most people get rattled. You adapt. Her heart skipped once. Maybe I'm just too stubborn to be rattled. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Stubborn can be an asset. In the right dose. They talked longer than either expected. About their first jobs. His time working construction at 18. Her years waitressing through college. Their mutual love of old jazz. When he laughed, actually laughed at one of her sarcastic comments, Ella felt something shift inside her. Something dangerous. Because for the first time, she saw him, not the CEO, not the machine. Just the man. And that, she realized, might be even more dangerous. It started with the rain. A slow drizzle turned to a steady downpour, painting the windows of the company car in streaks of gray. The windshield wipers worked rhythmically, but the fog still blurred the road ahead. Ella sat beside Nathaniel in the back seat, her laptop open on her knees. She wasn't working anymore. The battery was dead. She just didn't know where to look if it wasn't at the screen. The silence between them had grown familiar now, but it wasn't the cold kind anymore. It was charged, tense, loaded with things neither of them dared say out loud. They had just finished a long day at a construction site inspection on the outskirts of Delmont. Nathaniel had insisted on being hands-on with this project. Investors were skeptical about the timeline, and King didn't trust anyone but himself to deliver the pitch. Ella had been by his side for every tense conversation, every sharp negotiation. She matched his pace, memorized his script, and handed him coffee exactly how he liked it without asking. He hadn't snapped at her once all day. That was new. Now the car's movement began to slow. Too much. Then stopped completely. Nathaniel frowned. What's happening? The driver's voice came through the intercom. Apologies, Mr. King. Flooding ahead. We're not getting through until the road clears. GPS suggests a detour, but it's another hour minimum. Nathaniel muttered a curse under his breath and ran a hand through his head, a gesture Ella had never seen before. He looked annoyed, yes, but also frustrated in a very human, very uncontrolled way. She blinked. We could wait it out. He gave her a look. We don't wait. We move. Well, unless you've got wings hidden in that coat, we're stuck like everyone else. His brow lifted slightly. Is that sarcasm, Miss Roberts? She met his gaze directly. Yes. You earned it. And to her utter disbelief, he smiled. Not a smirk. A real fleeting smile. It tugged at the corner of his mouth, like something he didn't quite know how to stop. I'll allow it, he said, and leaned back in his seat. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. Outside, the storm raged on. Rain tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm. The fog rolled in thicker now, the sky a bruise-colored canvas. Inside the car, the air felt strangely warmer. Denser. Ella shifted, stretching her legs out slightly, then winced as her knee brushed his. Sorry, she mumbled, pulling back quickly. It's fine. His voice was softer now. She hesitated. Then, almost without thinking, asked, Do you ever get tired? He glanced at her, surprised. Of what? Being like this. Always in control. Always pushing. He didn't answer right away. He turned his gaze to the window, watching raindrops chase each other across the glass. Yes, he said finally. But stopping means falling behind. Not everything is a race. He looked at her again, something unreadable in his expression. In my world, it is. There it was again, that flicker of vulnerability behind the granite facade. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. You just did. She smiled despite herself. Why me? Why did you choose me for this trip? Nathaniel's jaw worked, like he was debating whether to answer. Then he leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely. Because you don't break easily, he said. Ella felt her breath hitch. She hadn't expected that. You push back. Quietly. Smartly. Everyone else either grovels or runs. You don't. I didn't think you noticed me. I notice everything. That silence returned, thick and charged. Their eyes met. And for one terrifying, thrilling second, something passed between them. Something real. Something that felt too much like possibility. She looked away first. The driver spoke through the intercom again. We'll be here a while, sir. Road's still shut. Nathaniel sighed. Turn off the engine. We'll wait. The car shut down, leaving only the rain and their breathing. A long moment passed. I don't think I've ever sat in a car with a boss for this long without panicking, Ella muttered, forcing a light tone. Nathaniel chuckled. I don't think I've sat in a car with anyone for this long without firing them. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. He looked over at her again, and something in his gaze changed. Shifted. Softened. I'm not as heartless as I seem, he said, almost under his breath. She turned toward him. Then stop pretending you are. The words hung between them. Heavy. Electric. Nathaniel didn't look away this time. He reached up slowly, brushing a loose curl from her face. His fingers lingered, grazing her cheek. Ella's pulse thundered in her ears. His voice dropped to a near whisper. You really drive me insane. She swallowed, her voice barely audible. Good. They were too close. Too still. But neither of them moved away. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside that car, something far more dangerous was brewing. And neither of them wanted it to stop. The rain had stopped by the time they got back to the hotel, but the storm had not. It lingered between them. In every glance, every word left unspoken, every second of silence stretched taut with electricity. They didn't speak during the ride up the elevator. Ella stood beside Nathaniel, her arms crossed tightly across her chest as if trying to contain the fire inside her. He stood still, eyes fixed on the glowing numbers above the door. But she could feel the tension rolling off him like heat waves. His jaw was clenched, his hands in his pockets, as if the very act of being still was an effort. The elevator dinged softly on the 42nd floor. They stepped out. For a moment, they just stood there in the hallway, facing their separate suite doors across from each other. She could feel his eyes on her, and she didn't dare look up, afraid that if she did, she might not be able to walk away. "I'll send you the schedule for tomorrow," she said, reaching for the key card in her purse. Her voice was low, controlled, too controlled. "Ella." Her hand froze on the door handle. He never called her that. She turned slowly. He was still standing by his own door, but now he was facing her fully. His eyes weren't cold. They weren't calculating. They were burning, barely restrained. "Are we pretending nothing happened?" he asked. Her heart pounded. "We didn't do anything." He stepped forward once. Just once. But it felt like the floor shifted beneath her. "You know that's not true." She took a breath, but it came out shaky. "Nathaniel." "I've tried to ignore it," he said, voice low and even. "Tried to keep things clean. Professional. But you sit in a room, and I can't stop watching you. You speak, and I hear everything except your words. I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. But it's there." Ella's back pressed against the door. He was in front of her now. Close. Too close. And she hated how much she wanted him there. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. He nodded once. "The worst." Neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he raised a hand and touched her cheek. His thumb brushed along her jaw, feather-light, as if waiting for her to stop him. She didn't. The kiss didn't come all at once. It started with the space between them shrinking, inch by inch, breath by breath, until his forehead rested against hers, and she could feel his breath, warm and uneven. He was trembling slightly. So was she. "I haven't wanted anything in a long time," he murmured. "Until now." And then his mouth found hers. It was a kiss filled with every ounce of restraint they'd fought to maintain. Every long stare. Every suppressed glance. It wasn't gentle. It was aching, ravenous, like they'd both been starving and had only just now allowed themselves to eat. Ella gripped the lapels of his suit, pulled him closer, closer, until there was no space left between them. He kissed like a man losing control, and for once wanting to. When they finally broke apart, breathless, his hands remained on her hips, fingers pressing into the fabric of her blouse like he needed to remember this moment was real. "Come inside," she said before she could stop herself. He didn't ask her to repeat it. He didn't hesitate. Her suite door opened, and they stumbled inside. The click of the door closing behind them echoed like a thunderclap. In the dim light, they didn't speak. Words felt too small, too fragile. His jacket fell to the floor. Her blouse followed. The world outside, the meetings, the titles, the expectations, melted into nothing. In its place, touch. His hands ran down the curve of her spine, her fingers over his neck. They moved together as if they had known each other for years, not days. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, only urgency and heat, and a sense of falling headfirst into something they didn't have a name for. When he finally lifted her in his arms and laid her down on the bed, he hovered over her for a long second. "This changes everything," he whispered. "I know," she said, pulling him down to her. "Let it." And that night, beneath city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they didn't just touch. They gave in. To longing. To vulnerability. To something dangerous and real and impossible to undo. The ruthless CEO and the assistant who wasn't supposed to matter. Except she did. And now she always would. Ella woke to silence. No alarm. No emails pinging. No knock at her door. Just the soft, natural stillness of early morning and the slow, steady sound of breathing beside her. For a moment, she didn't move. She lay still, eyes half open, watching the way the light crept through the sheer curtains and painted thin lines across the white hotel sheets. The air smelled like cedar and rain and something distinctly male. "Nathaniel." Her heart flipped inside her chest. She turned her head slightly. He was still asleep, on his back, arm draped loosely over the space where she had been, brow relaxed for the first time since she'd met him. There were no sharp lines, no tension, no armor. Just him. Real. Unmasked. Ella's throat tightened, because this wasn't just a one-time mistake. It didn't feel temporary. It didn't feel like a secret fling tucked inside a stressful work trip. Last night had been too raw for that. Too honest. She sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around her as she slipped out of bed. Her bare feet touched the cold marble floor. A deep ache moved through her, not just in her body, but in her heart. What happens now? She padded to the bathroom, brushing her teeth, trying to ignore the wild butterflies in her stomach. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd demolished it. When she emerged, Nathaniel was awake, shirtless, half sitting up against the headboard, scrolling through his phone. Back to CEO mode. "Morning," she said carefully. He looked up at her, and for a moment, she saw the softness from last night still lingering in his expression. Then it disappeared, replaced by something unreadable. "Morning," he echoed. Ella hesitated by the side of the bed. "You okay?" Nathaniel set the phone down and swung his legs over the edge of the bed, planting his feet on the floor. His elbows rested on his knees. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "We shouldn't have done that." Her stomach dropped. "Oh," she said. It came out flat, hollow. He stood and reached for his shirt. "It complicates things." She bit down on her lip. Complicated doesn't mean wrong. Nathaniel stilled. "Ella, don't," she said, suddenly furious. "Don't call me that like it means something, and then pretend last night didn't." His hands clenched. "I'm not pretending." "Could have fooled me," she said, voice rising. "You make a habit of sleeping with people and shutting them out the next morning?" His jaw flexed. "No, I make a habit of not letting people get close. And I just broke that rule." She crossed her arms over her chest. "So what, now you punish me for it?" He exhaled, turning to face her. "You don't understand the position I'm in. I'm not just a man, Ella. I'm a brand. A business. Every step I take is watched. Judged. One misstep. And I'm your misstep?" His silence hit harder than any words could have. She stared at him, pain slicing through her like glass. "You know what? Forget it. Let's go back to cold commands and clipped schedules. That's the Nathaniel King everyone loves so much, right?" He stepped forward, voice sharp. "Don't twist this." "I'm not twisting anything. You wanted honesty? That was real last night. You're the one pretending it wasn't." Her chest was rising and falling quickly now, anger and hurt and disappointment all mixing in a storm she hadn't prepared for. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw it, the regret, the hesitation, the fear. But he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, frozen. Ella grabbed her robe and turned away. "Get out." He didn't argue, didn't fight. The door clicked shut behind him. And just like that, he was gone. The rest of the day moved in a blur of motion, but none of it felt real. Ella sat through meetings like a ghost, smiling when needed, nodding on cue, jotting down notes with numb fingers. Nathaniel acted as though nothing had happened. He was back in full CEO mode, cold, precise, impenetrable. He didn't look at her once. And that, more than the silence, was what broke her. During the late evening boardroom review, she accidentally dropped a folder. Papers spilled across the floor. Nathaniel didn't flinch, didn't help, didn't even glance her way. Something in her cracked open. When the meeting finally ended, she walked straight past him, brushing his shoulder as she passed. He didn't follow. In the elevator, she stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls. Her blouse was buttoned wrong. Her lipstick had faded. She looked like a woman pretending to be whole. Back in her suite, she didn't cry. Not at first. She changed slowly, washed her face, and sat by the window, staring out at the lights of Delmont City. She had let herself believe something impossible. She had started to fall for him. And he had run. At midnight, her door buzzed. She stared at it, breath catching. She didn't move. It buzzed again. Once. Then silence. She walked to the door, barefoot, heart pounding. But when she opened it, no one. Only a small, folded note on the floor. She picked it up, hands trembling, and unfolded it carefully. "I never should have let you go. N." Ella closed her eyes, chest aching. because now it was too late. Ella didn't sleep that night. The note sat on the table beside her, creased now from how many times she'd folded and unfolded it. She must have read it 100 times, memorizing every loop of his handwriting, every inch of that single, aching sentence. I never should have let you go. But he had. And now? She didn't know what to do with that. The morning light was soft when it crept into the room, but it didn't warm her. She moved like a ghost through the motions, shower, blouse, heels, hair. She didn't want to face him again, but they still had work to do. 2 more days in Delmont. One last event. Then it would be over. And what would she be? Just another mistake in his careful life. When she stepped out of the suite, she paused, then looked across the hall. His door was open. Her heart skipped. Just a little. Nathaniel stood inside, speaking quietly to someone on the phone. His voice was measured, but his eyes flicked to hers instantly. Held. Didn't look away. She stared at him for only a moment, then turned and walked to the elevator. Let him follow this time. The day passed in a blur of fake smiles and thin patience. Ella worked the investor breakfast, the strategic meetings, the product reveal. All of it like a woman playing a part. Nathaniel remained composed, silent, always a few steps ahead, just like always. Except this time, she felt him watching her. Not like before. Not with criticism or control. With something else. Regret. Hunger. And something deeper. By late afternoon, she'd had enough. The last event, a gala at the historic Delmont Conservatory, was hours away. Ella stayed back at the hotel while Nathaniel met with board members. She needed air. She walked alone through the city, past old bookstores and cafes glowing gold through their windows. She stopped at a street corner and looked up at the changing sky, thick with clouds but no rain. It felt like everything was holding its breath. So was she. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Nathaniel King. Please come to the rooftop before the gala. Just you. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she turned back, hailed a cab, and told the driver to take her to the Imperial Grand. The rooftop was quiet. Elegant. Lit only by the soft golden glow of string lights strung between marble columns. Beyond the railing, the skyline of Delmont glittered like the inside of a jewelry box. He stood near the edge in a black suit, no tie, hands in his pockets, shoulders rigid. When he turned and saw her, everything in his face shifted. He looked like a man holding something too big to carry and too precious to let fall. I wasn't sure if you'd come, he said. Ella stepped toward him, arms crossed against the chill. You left a note and disappeared. I needed space to think. And he took a slow step forward. I thought about how I've spent my life building walls so high that no one could ever climb over. I thought about how I watched you walk away and said nothing, because I was afraid I'd ruin you. She shook her head, voice low. You don't get to decide what ruins me. His eyes darkened. I know. That's why I'm here. Another step closer. I ruined a lot of things by staying silent, he said. But the truth is you scare the hell out of me. She blinked. Me. You make me want things I've never let myself want. You see through everything. And I've built my entire life around being untouchable. Then you walked in smart, sharp, never backing down, and suddenly everything I knew stopped making sense. Ella didn't move. You think I'm cold, he said. And I am. But with you, I started to thaw. And that terrified me. A long pause. I told myself I couldn't afford to want you. But I do. I always have. He took the final step, now just inches from her. I want the late nights and the morning coffee and the fights and the forgiveness. I want all of it. With you. Her eyes welled and she hated it, how easily he cracked her open. I didn't want to fall for you, she whispered. I was halfway in before I even realized what was happening. He reached up, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I don't want perfect, he said. I want real. Even if it's messy. Even if it scares the hell out of me. She exhaled, heart pounding. I'm not going to chase you anymore, he said. But I'll wait right here if you're willing to try. For a long time, Ella said nothing. Then she reached up, gently took his hand, and placed it over her heart. "You're not the only one who's scared," she said. "But I'm tired of pretending I don't want you." His hand tightened in hers. Then he kissed her. This time it wasn't desperate. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, deep, and devastating in its sweetness. It tasted like forgiveness, like relief, like every unspoken word they'd held back for weeks. When they broke apart, breathless, she laughed softly. "What now?" Nathaniel smiled, real, open, and completely unguarded. "Now," he said, "we stop pretending." The Delmont project had been completed ahead of schedule. King Enterprises had doubled in valuation. And Nathaniel King now walked into meetings with a subtle smile, and the woman everyone used to underestimate sitting right beside him. Ella Roberts. Partner in strategy. Partner in life. They didn't need grand gestures. They had the little things: coffee in the morning, hands under the table, whispered jokes during long presentations, and the knowledge that when the storm came, they'd walk through it together. Because in the end, love didn't come in perfect packages. It came in the middle of impossible deadlines, boardroom tension, and 30 days that neither of them wanted. But it stayed, and it changed everything. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.